Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms where I give you a heads up about upcoming shows and which date and time they will be aired. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the shows, MP3 files which you can download, or links to your favorite platform like iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and all other major sources. You can find information for upcoming and past talk show appearances as well as new book projects at MarlenePardo.com. You can also purchase books and merchandise there. And you can visit my author page on Amazon at Marlene Pardo Pellicer. Due to popular demand, I'm narrating my True Believer stories that I've collected throughout the years in a new series called Supernatural Storytime. You can find links at supernaturalstorytime.com. If you are into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate some of those at Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If you would like to read noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. I do want to thank you all for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing today? Good, I hope. I'm doing fantastic. I know it's going to be a little while before you guys actually listen to this, but anyway, Happy New Year. Happy 2020. We're in the 20s, and I want to say it again. I said it for the last 3 shows. It seemed like the other day we were going into Y2K, and everybody was having like a minor meltdown because everything was going to collapse because nothing was going to recognize 2000. And here we are 20 years later. Hello. There we go. Nothing happened. Everything chugged along, and time sped by. And the point I'm trying to make, like I've done, that sometimes we create these fears over things that never come to pass. Never materialize. And by this, I don't mean that we shouldn't be prepared or, look at things and say, wow, you know what? I need to think about what's going on, with my life, or, make preparations. But we spend a lot of our time worrying about things, real heavy, like existential things that never come to pass, and we kind of lose the energy that we should devote to other things that really matter. And I'm not talking about worry. I'm talking about energy as in thought, figuring things out or pondering them, because we're all caught up with the worry because we think that if we worry a lot, we're prepared. We'll be prepared. And I'm sure that everybody can look back and say, there was a lot of stuff, especially as you get older, by the way, especially the heavy duty stuff that you say, I really was so worried about this. And yeah, some things sometimes happen, but there's a lot of stuff I spent so much time worrying about and it never happened. Or if it did, it was never, some of us go to that worst case scenario thing. Okay, which by the way, this is what was happening when Y2K was going on. It went to worst case scenario. And of course, Hollywood didn't help because what did they have? A meteor heading towards Earth? What else? It was horrible. And then, like I said, this is not the what if. This is what actually did happen. New challenges. And also, I do a lot of research. And I do a lot of research into old newspaper clippings. Sometimes that go back 200 years, 100 years, 150, depending on what I'm researching. You'd be surprised when you look at the headlines of some of these newspapers. Some of the things look like earth-shattering. But when we look at it from 100 years in the future, it was like, oh, wow. But what I'm saying is at that moment, the hype that goes into these events, of course, which at that point is to draw in readers because, we're all unfortunately fascinated more than we should be. It looks like monumental, the trial of the century, the this of the century, the. And 100 years later, everybody's dead, and here we are, the new generations living life. And again, we come back to how much should we take in, and at least filter it. I believe that we should filter, and I don't mean question every single thing, because if not, you will drive each other crazy. But when we unfortunately we get overwhelmed with so much information from all sides that there's hardly any time that you're not going to get hit. I mean, newspapers really aren't that much around per se, but we have things that have replaced them, which, by the way, impact us a lot more than reading a newspaper, because you're talking about television shows. Television, how's that? Television in all its forms, which, and you guys know that because, of what I know about hypnosis. Some people, depending on music, will go into a trance where they accept it instead of listening to something and going, questioning it, or, thinking, does that sound right? No, or maybe that's a little bit overdone. No, they kind of like take it in. And then before you know it, the next few days, they're walking around like, oh my God, whoa, did you hear about that? And it's like it became from an insignificant event that might affect us to an earth-shattering, something's going to happen. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind for you, those of you who have not been alive that long. Or even, I mean, I look back, and if I could go back and give my 20-year-old self some advice, that would be one of them, which is take it with a grain of salt, literally. There's a lot of things that all the worry, on the contrary, it serves to hold us back from executing. That's my favorite word, execute, not just plan, because we're all hung up on the fear, which is always our enemy. But and of course, I know you guys are everything in the farm is fine. In a way, I'm glad. I hate to say it, that the holidays are kind of over, because I was very happy. I had on December 24th, I had a new grandson born, which it was great because everybody dropped all their Christmas stuff and was in the hospital. So I'm very happy. It was a very, very joyous Christmas for me and for my family. But in a way, now that it's over, I'm like, man, holidays sometimes can be exhausting. So yeah, everything's been put away. And it's back to business as usual, kind of. And here I am, because, like I told you guys, I didn't record anything during December, even though I was releasing shows, but back to work. So let me tell you about the good part. Okay, the good part, of course, is who I have as a guest. Now, this gentleman, he's known as TruthSeekah. All one word, and you guys will see a link to his website on the credits of the show. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He is a Christian mystic, an author, visionary artist, and seer with a vision to release the spirit of awakening. He's also a songwriter who's released over 200 songs, each one relating to the subject of spirituality. Now, his journey's brought him through research and experience with the occult, the paranormal, Christianity, and the spirit realm. This has led him into many mystical encounters with God, angels, spirits, and many other supernatural beings. He's the host of TruthSeekah podcast, and he's interviewed hundreds of experts and leaders in their fields, again, in those subjects of the supernatural, religious, philosophical, and paranormal studies. He's made his life work to understand the spiritual realms and relate it back to people in a practical way. In October, he released a book, which you'll see the cover of on one of the slides of the show, called Spirit Realm. Okay, Spirit Realm. And we're going to talk to him about, about that book. But what my first question always is, it's how did you find yourself getting involved in this? My favorite is, was it a childhood thing, or was it something that plunked you like a 2x4 as an adult on the head? But anyway, let's welcome him. How are you doing today, TruthSeekah, or Derek?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm doing well. How are you?
Fantastic. I am super excited to have you on. And now you heard what I said. What propelled you to go into this field? Childhood? What was it?
Yeah. I like to start there too on my podcast when I have guests on. What was it? Like, how old were you? And I love going back to the childhood stuff, because that's what it was for me. Waking up I remember going back to being about 4 years old, waking up in the middle of the night and having a sleep terror encounter where you wake up in sleep paralysis. And I felt
Oh,
two beings on each side of my chest, on my shoulders, pinning me down to my bed when I was a kid. I woke up, I felt them, I seen them. It's just big black shadows. Was scared to death, couldn't move, couldn't speak. Don't know if I couldn't speak or if I was just too scared to speak, but it was something that really scared me. I knew I had to cough, and I was just trying my best to hold it in. And that fear and that terror, man, that came into my life as a little kid, and it always left me with questions, like growing up, going to sleepovers and telling ghost stories and stuff, and we'd talk about experiences and UFOs or whatever, and I would always bring that up. Have you guys ever woke up and had, these encounters? Anybody in your room? And other people would say, yeah, I had something like that. Or I remember my cousin talking about having seeing this man with a top hat standing in the corner of his
okay.
room. And even when I was a kid, it sounded weird. But now that I do the research in these fields, like, that's a legit thing. The man that wears the top
Yeah.
hat and the trench coat in the room. Like,
Yes.
and so I would ask questions to my cousins, and you'd hear different things. I heard stories that they were witches and they were good. They were witches,
Right.
but they were good, and they would come and wake you up when stuff was happening. Heard stories about people's houses being on fire, and then the witches would be there to wake them up at the foot of the bed. Different
Wow.
things like that. So it was real interesting. Uh, that's definitely what opened the door. It was the gate to the spirit realm, and so that, and then other encounters as I was growing up and being led to horror movies and paranormal shows on television and movies and stuff like that really opened me up to the exploration into the paranormal, and then even witchcraft, into the occult and things like that. And so begin to
Okay.
practice that stuff and have encounters myself, which changed the course of my life to lead me down this path to where I am today.
Wow. That is quite a story. In a way, I have to laugh because I can just imagine you as a kid trying to compare notes and hoping, I hope I'm not the only one that this is happening to. Because, boy, as a kid, and this is what I tell people. They don't realize when you're a child, what are you going to do? You're stuck. You can't just like say, well, I think I'm going to move out from this place, or, hey, let's leave town, or, you're there. If your family or your parents, whatever, are going to stay there, you're stuck. You have to endure it. And let me ask you, did you ever tell your family what was going on?
Like later in life, it was kind of those same conversations,
Okay.
around the campfire or telling ghost stories and say, hey, you guys ever, having those stories. So that kind of happened. Now that I look back on it a little bit, like, I really feel like my mom and dad at the time, and I grew up in New Orleans, and so it was really
Okay.
common. It was really common for families to practice little forms of voodoo, even if they
Right.
weren't teachers or really deep into it. They would burn candles. If someone stole something from them, then they would put a
Right.
hex on them. That was kind of common knowledge, and so there was some of that kind of going on in the house. And then I remember, my childhood being really weird too, because my parents would have these huge parties with all these strangers in the house. And so there would be all of these weird people over there, and people would fall out drunk. I mean, sloppy. Just, I remember sitting at the dinner table with some random guy talking to this old man, and in mid conversation, he just falls straight backward, falls
Yeah.
off the chair, and passes out. And I'm like 4 years old having a conversation with this man. And so that was normal, but it's like the energies and the things that they
Yeah.
would let in the house. It really has me questioning, like,
Yes.
some of this stuff. Did they open up doors, or were they
Yeah.
opening up, entertaining these spirits unaware, if you will? And so, yeah,
Yes.
it kind of led me in the road of just kind of, looking into that stuff.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I hate to say it, but in a way, yeah, maybe they didn't mean it, and I'm sure
Yeah.
by now you've heard, of a lot of people that have had encounters with, whether it's the Ouija board or some, channeling, that what they at the beginning think is something that's not evil or dangerous. Eventually, it does. In other words, it doesn't start out that way. It becomes
Yeah.
that way.
Hmm.
And things like that, I think that a lot, that's how a lot of people find themselves in these really horrible situations, because that was not their intention, whether they did it on purpose or whether they, you were young and fooling around. And people don't realize that sometimes you even have certain guests in your house that will leave stuff behind.
Yeah.
And then that is the origins a lot of times of really unusual events. But so what you're describing, considering what you were telling me about having grown up in New Orleans, see, that puts it a little bit more in context, because I was going to say, well, did that place have a reputation for being haunted, or like, where did this come from? But now I get it. Now I understand why. So here you are. Did you stay? Did this follow you to different houses, or were you there?
Yeah.
So okay. So it was.
Yeah. So it just, I guess, just that peering into the unknown. It was always there. So it would lead into movies, and then, movies have a way of, stirring the imagination or open up portals as well, putting ideas in your mind.
Yes.
So the movies and the music and that growing up, and so really into the occult and got into that stuff. And like you said, it really piqued my interest into the unknown, and finding witchcraft books and all this kind of stuff,
Right.
and then starting to practice some of the rituals that we've seen in these books, and playing with Ouija
Right.
boards, trying to contact spirits and stuff like that. So yeah, it definitely opened up those doors. And I as a teenager, got to this weird place where I'll just preface it by saying that, I was into like some just dark stuff and just tampering as a misguided youth, and looking into some occult stuff, listening to dark music, a lot of Marilyn Manson and stuff like that, and rebellious stuff. But then I ended up going to a Bible study with a guy who was kind of like an older brother figure, and he took me to this Bible study and told me that there was going to be a prophet there, because he had been trying to get me to go to these Bible studies in church with him for months, and I didn't want to go. He said, well, there's going to be a prophet here. And I was like, well, what's that? He said, a prophet is like a Christian psychic. I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. So I'm into this kind of stuff, and so I went to check it out, and went to this little bitty apartment, and it's about 15 people in this little apartment, and they're playing worship music, and people have their eyes closed and their hands raised, and they're like, it seems like they're not there, like they're in another place, a peaceful place. Some people are crying, beautiful music playing, and it was interesting to me, and I felt like this weird presence there that felt beautiful and peaceful. And one of the guys came up to me and said, Derek, do you want Jesus to forgive you of your sins? Just that simple. And I said, yeah. I don't want him to hold my sins against me, So he said, okay, you want to pray? I said, sure, let's pray. And so he just led me on this little simple prayer of repentance, asking Christ to come into my life, forgive me of my sins, those kind of things, and acknowledging what Jesus did on the cross, making him Lord of my life. And I prayed that prayer, and when I did, I meant it with all my heart. And I felt this spiritual euphoria, this fire, I feel like it come down from heaven and come into my body. And it's this fervent heat that began to cleanse out like all the wrong that I had ever done. I felt like I was made new. It just cleansed my whole body and my spirit. And I began to cry and weep and just start shaking. And I couldn't stop convulsing, but it was beautiful. It was just a beautiful experience. And so I started going to church with them and doing the Christian thing. This was in 1998. And going to church and stuff like that. But it only lasted for just a couple months over the summer. So I got enrolled into a different school and immediately, met people who were into drugs and back into the same type of music and stuff. So the Christian thing didn't really last that long, even though it was beautiful. And I still kept going to church here and there. I started leaning more to the darker stuff again. And then so ended up meeting someone who was a warlock in the neighborhood, and an older guy who would let a lot of people come over to his house and throw big parties and stuff. And we would pick his brain all night about the craft and about witchcraft and demons. And he'd tell us stories that he had and how to do, banishings and spells and stuff like that. Really, really interesting. But that piqued my interest, and I got back into the stuff I was into before, but really deep. I started reading the Satanic Bible, a lot of Wicca stuff like that. And then so really got to this place where I just started opening up portals and doing meditation to any type of spirit that wanted to come through.
Oh,
And
Wow.
yeah, and would lay on the bed, and my fiance, girlfriend at the time, wife now, would lead me in these meditations to go through and meet these different entities. And I was just doing so many of them. Like I would do one, it didn't work. I'd do another one, didn't work. Because I knew that the other side was real, right? I had these experiences as a kid.
Right, right.
And then had this beautiful encounter with God and the Holy Spirit, right? So I knew there was something there. So let me try to tap into this stuff to do some of the things that the warlock was doing. Like he was really good at making contact with entities, and I tried to do it, and nothing really came through. At the time, I was misguided youth. We were robbing people into gang activity, using drugs, all this kind of things. And so all of that coupled with trying to contact entities, whether they're demons and all of these, every single one, they were just trying to make contact. Really, I tried to reach through to the other side, and all of a sudden, immediately, something reached back. And so I found myself in this weird place to where I was being pulled in and out of trances in the middle of the day, sitting at home with my fiance and watching TV, sucked into a portal in my mind, and I'm seeing colors and shapes and wisps and smoke and all this weird stuff, and hearing voices, but they were speaking foreign languages and all at once, and I would turn pale and couldn't breathe, and my heart would be racing, and I would come back out of it, and I'd just be crying, and it was so scary. I felt like I didn't have any control over it. Felt like they were messing with me, taking my mind from me, and this lasted for several weeks. My health started to deteriorate. Started coughing up blood.
What?
And and so the next, kept happening to me, and it was so scary. It felt like I was dying, and I told my girlfriend, I was like, we need to pray. Like this isn't good. If I should go to a doctor, they're going to put me on some medication, put me in a straitjacket, that kind of stuff, And so I remember the beautiful presence of Jesus that I felt at those prayer meetings in that church. And I was like, there was a place of serenity and peace, that I wanted back in my life. So I got her to pray with me one night after having an episode. The next morning, I woke up feeling better and threw away everything in my house, all of the idols, the statues, the daggers and things we would use for ritual, the clothing, the music, got rid of everything, pawned what we could of the stolen witchcraft books that we had about 40 or 50 books. We stole them all. So there's the energy you're dealing with too.
Yeah.
Got rid of them all and bought some clothes to go to church and Bibles, and started calling all these churches in the neighborhood. And I would leave messages on the answer machine for these churches asking these pastors to pray with me because I felt like I had demons.
Okay.
And after about 15, 16 churches I called, one pastor called me back.
Really?
And ended up coming to the house to pray with me. He made a trip out there, and then he started picking us up, bringing us back and forth to church and stuff like that. So that was September 7th of 2000 that I gave my life to Christ. Just started walking with him ever since. And so, yeah, my life is kind of a model of tapping into that realm and getting bit by something, and I guess living to tell about it too,
Let me ask you something. Like you said, the first time, unfortunately, you got swept away from it. What did you find that this thing was going to try to pull you back in again?
Yeah, I mean, so there's in the Bible it talks about Jesus says, what happens when a spirit leaves a person, when an unclean spirit or defiled spirit leaves someone. It says it goes out to dry places,
right? And
it goes and gets 7 stronger spirits, stronger than he is. So once you cast this entity out, it goes to get stronger guys to come back. And it says if the spirit comes back and that home is swept clean, and like you've done the inner work, you've cut those addictions out or whatever it may be. If the house is clean and in order, then they just go about their way. But if it comes back and the house is the same way, then they come back with 7 stronger spirits, and it says the state of that person is worse than it was before. And that's what happened to me. So they left, when I was a teenager, just messing with this stuff. And left and got into church and cast all that stuff out, repented. But then I got back into it. And then they came greater to a degree where I was going schizophrenic, hearing voices. I was a teenager, wasn't using any hard drugs or anything like that. And so yeah, I felt like they came back to collect, and my house wasn't swept clean, and now they're gone. So that was, like I said, in 2000. So been you know
So,
walking.
in other words, yeah, and it's incredible because even though you were involved in all of this and you were immersing yourself, you did recognize what's going on here. It's not, in other words, it's not like I'm going crazy. Like, I know my sanity is still here. Okay, this is happening outside of me or to me, in other words.
Hmm.
Because, a lot of times when people have these experiences, sometimes, like you said, you weren't doing hard drugs or anything like that. They think that the problem is them. Okay, it's their mind, in other words. And they don't look at what's really going on, which is outside of them. In this case, and so you've been after 2000, you said, right? What's your life been like? Because I can imagine that you had to kind of basically adjust who you hung out with, everything about your
Oh
life,
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. See, that was a big thing because we were living in Louisiana at the time, but my girlfriend was living with me, and she's from Alabama. So we started going to church and trying to hang out with the same friends and stuff. And I remember going, with this new life and trying to do right, And then I went and picked up a friend, and we picked him up, and he got in the back seat, and he started fidgeting around with something, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he pulls out this steak knife. I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I can't trust nobody, man." I was like,
Oh,
"Okay, yeah, we got to drop you off and get it. This is we're done with this." So from that point, it was like, okay, yeah, I need to. And so we had these list of prayers, man. We were like praying every night, me and my girlfriend, and it was like 7 things. It was, I need new friends. We want to be relocated back to Alabama. Our car was jacked up, and we needed our car fixed, and all of these things. And we would pray every night and believe God for it. And within a week, like all of those prayers that we had written down and we're speaking
okay,
out loud and asking God to help us with, within a week, they were all like supernaturally answered.
wow,
My wife walked into her. We went to visit back in Alabama, her family, and we wanted to relocate. We were just here just for the weekend, but we wanted to relocate.
okay.
We drove the car there, and the car was, I mean, you turn it on and it like pedal to the metal. You had to ride the brake. Like you didn't even have to push the gas. That's how it was. But we went from Louisiana to Alabama. We made it. She went back to visit some of her friends where she used to work, and she walked right in the front door, and she was going to look for a job. She walked in the front door. They said, "Hey, Aaron, you want your job back?" And they were joking, but she
Wow.
said, "Yeah, actually, I do." Okay, you start tomorrow or whatever. It's like, what? So we like wanting to move back here, get jobs and all these things, and her
Yeah,
parents
that's it.
paid.
Was one of the most important things right there.
Yeah, her parents paid to get the car fixed, and immediately we were embraced by old friends. So we had like all these old friends who were like in the church or whatever. So we had all these new friends, and there were just so many things that we had a place to stay and new jobs and stuff. And it was just like this kind of way it felt like God was answering our prayers and showing us like this new life and how He has everything under control and things.
Isn't that's incredible when you say that thing about, because a lot of times people, they do want to do things, but then they're, well, like you said, I need a job, my car, it's like I've got a million things going on of what's wrong, in other words. And here in other words, you actually put it in faith. You just, okay, because otherwise, if I try to logic my way into this, it's not going to work, because logic is telling me that I've got all these obstacles. So how's this going to work? And
Yep.
also, it sounds like you were very lucky in the sense that your girlfriend, now wife, also was on board with you.
Well, that's another story too. So I'll just, because I kind of skipped it. When I was going through this phase of when I woke up throwing everything away, like I
Mm-hmm.
woke up the next morning after having that bad attack, like I took all of our books, posters off the wall. I mean, everything. I put it in the garbage bags, T-shirts, all that, and took it all and threw it in the garbage. I said, "I'm getting rid of it. I got to change." And she was
Okay.
freaking out. "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I said, "No, I have to go back to God. Like I can't do this any longer." And she's like,
Okay.
doesn't understand. And I said, look, I said, either you can move back to Alabama or you can try this with me. You can go back and live with your mom and dad. I don't care, but I have to get my life together. There's no way. I'm freaking out, going crazy. She's crying. And I said, like I said, you can, follow God, put your faith in Christ and whatever. She's like, well, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in Jesus. I said, well, just try. She's like, I can't try. I don't believe in something. You're trying to make me believe in something that I don't believe in. I said, well, we're believing in the goddess and the god and the sun and the moon and the fairies and Pan and all of these other entities. We could believe in all that, but we can't believe in Jesus. I said, look, try it for 1 week. And if our life isn't 100% better after 1 week, I'll go back and worship whatever you want me to. Like that's how much I knew like my faith was. And she said, okay. And sure enough, again, within that first week, God just kind of, changed our lives, man, drastically. It was amazing.
That is quite a story. That is quite a story. So, and you know what? And then I want to say another thing. And this is the practical stuff. When you made that decision to leave New Orleans, in other words, you said, I imagine at some point you said, if I stay here,
oh yeah,
it's not going to work,
Yeah. Yeah.
So you did a real smart thing. You like cut cords. You just cut it with everybody. And it was like, hey,
It's a step of faith, literally.
Yeah, because like you said,
it was funny too because we were wanting to go visit and try to, because our mom and dad said if y'all can make it back, we'll get the car fixed. And so okay. But we didn't have any money, and back then you can about $20 to fill the tank up back then, and we didn't have any money, and so her grandmother's like, okay, pull the tire out, look under the tire. I put you $20 under there, just in case you needed it, if you ever needed to get back. So her grandmother, like, had the money hidden in the car, so we can get back on the $20. Yeah, just little miracles, man. And so you learn to appreciate the small things, and I think that taught us to see God in everything, and to, and the beauty and majesty of the Creator in all things, and He knows every little minute detail about you. You're not out here by yourself just trying to figure things out. Like there's a creator, there's a song and dance that's intricate and beautiful and wants to work with you and encounter you in any way possible. So that was our foundation moving forward in our Christian walk. And then so we did the Christian experience for years, going to church, worship, youth group and worship meetings and just doing the regular Christian experience. But my walk got to be a little bit deeper. Okay. Studying some things that some questions that we were told not to ask about the Bible or about Jesus, and more spiritual stuff, or even the books that were taken out. Why were they taken out? Yeah. Well, they wasn't supposed to be in there to begin with. You'd hear these weird things, and so it just would, the seeking process, the answers that I was given from the elders and stuff didn't satisfy me. I didn't believe them, so I wanted to seek and find out these things for myself. So it really led me into a lot of deeper things, looking into stuff that was taken out and why it was taken out, and some of the stuff in it that was really interesting about angels and demons and things like that were mentioned of in some of these other books, the Book of Enoch and things like that. And so I began to fast and pray, and then I felt like God would lead me down these roads of study and then the sanctification, where like I would just be shown things about the spirit realm and be, shown things in the Bible, and then this beautiful synchronicity, and ended up just studying other philosophies and stuff as well, and being able to see God in it, or see even the Bible, like seeing like the terminology, like talking about the same things, just using different terminology or whatever. And the Christian community, they really wasn't, they really didn't like that. And at the time I was doing gospel hip hop, and I would speak at churches and tell them this story about how I was in the witchcraft and the occult and things like that. And so now I'm getting into other philosophers who using the word esoteric or whatever, mysticism or mystics of old. And so I would quote their stuff because it would resonate with me, and it would be like line for line of things that even Christ said, but just worded differently, but they wouldn't have any part with it. So it really drew like this wedge between me and what I was doing with evangelism in the Christian church, to like, okay, now you're New Age, or now you're into astrology and all these other things that I'm like, yeah, but it's in the Bible, and it's like speaking of it in a good way, and they didn't want anything to do with it. So it was back in around 2012, started going in this seesaw of going back and forth about my identity and who I was and the things that I felt like God had called me to, some of the deep, beautiful secrets of the Bible, even and the universe, and the deep calling out unto deep. But it was a seesaw, and this it was hard to kind of say goodbye to that life that I was embraced by the Christian community, which now looked at me as a devil worshiper. Really, they would say that people who looked up to me said, "Man, you fell off the bandwagon, and now you're worshiping." And it's like, no, I'm not worshiping the devil. And they would try to equate that to like, hold on, I know what it's like to worship the devil. Trust me, I've been there, I've done it. I got the scars to prove it. Literally, blood covenants and oaths to prove it. I've got the scars today, and I'm not worshiping Satan. So, that whole transition was very hard. And I'm lucky that I made it today, and I am who I am today with my sanity coming out of that, because that was so hard. Because my identity was in not who I was, but about what I did. My identity was that I was a leader and an entertainer or a great speaker. So finding my identity now outside of that, or maybe even a balance in between it, because I'm still a believer. Like, I still have my foundation, but I'm into some of the things that were that seemed taboo, but I trace it all back to the Bible, especially in my new book, Spirit Realm. I'm giving you all of these things that we would call occult. We're talking about telekinesis, telepathy, all of this, ESP, extrasensory perception, bilocation, going in and out of trances, traveling to heaven, astral projection. But I'm showing you examples in the Bible, and scriptures and lines, and in my experiences and stuff like that. So that's still my foundation, but it's this freedom to explore the beauties and depths of God in all things.
You know what? You're not the first person I've heard describe exactly what you said, that they reached a certain level of understanding, and then when they went seeking clarification, they were like shut down.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to talk about that, because really that's like, that has to do with Satan or the devil, and they would be like, but it's not. I just, in other words, it wasn't like a clarification was given and then told, hey, well, this is why. No, it was, we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
And I've had more than one person tell me, especially after they had been involved with it for a while. And like you said, you grow into that wanting to know more. Like, you reach the ceiling and you're like, you start questioning things. Like you said, well, if it's in the Bible, but they're like, no, we're going to pick and choose.
That's thinking, old. That's old. It's like, there's other old stuff that you guys love. Like when it comes for me to give you money, you love that old stuff. But what about the other old stuff?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I heard. People were saying, well, why? What's wrong with asking if it's in the Bible? What? No. It was like, this conversation is not going to happen.
Yeah.
And they eventually, some of the persons I've spoken to, eventually they went seeking other churches or other pastors that would at least listen to them. Okay. And then try to shut them down because of that, because they felt like they wanted answers to this one way or the other. It was either maybe I'm reading this and I'm not understanding it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but that's it. And I think that's human beings, not only as far as our mental capacity for knowledge, spiritually, we never stop evolving or growing. I think we do that all the way to the moment of our death. I mean, I don't think there's ever a moment that you could say, I know it all. Spiritually, I'm at that's it. I'm good where I'm at, and I just have to stay here because we're shaped by events, by things that happen around us. A lot of things, and we're always evolving, which I think is part of the challenge of being a live person, especially in the spiritual sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me ask you, by the way, what you were talking about earlier, where you were talking about whether, I don't know whether it were the youths or anybody, about your experiences prior, whether it was witchcraft or dark magic. And by this, I'm not talking about Wicca. I'm talking about dark magic, by whatever name, whether we're talking blood sacrifice, animals, and of course, there's thought of devil,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
human sacrifice or blah blah blah. I think that's fantastic because I imagine there's unfortunately there's a lot of ways out there that that children or teenagers, if you want to call them, or adolescents, get dragged into this by its appearance at the beginning not being dark. How's that?
Yeah. That was it for me too, because there was like, I can pinpoint certain things. There was a movie that came out, and it seemed like a beautiful movie. Like I seen it and I fell in love with it. It was a movie called The Craft.
Yeah, I remember that movie. Of course.
Yeah, and that movie did, when I was at the peak of doing, not the peak, but that opened up a door for me, and it made it look like something beautiful, and I can communicate with these entities and stuff like that. But it was like once I got into it, I was, I didn't do it right. I was just going through any door, any avenue that anything that wanted to come through. I was just so I would know that it was real and I had the power.
Okay.
Like I would try it. And that came from this experience that I had with the warlock guy.
Okay.
He was having a party at his house, and me and my cousin were down for the weekend in Alabama, and I would stay with different friends just for the night, and then I was going to go back to Louisiana that Sunday. My mom dropped me off. Got to visit my friends, got to visit my girlfriend. This is when she was still in high school, but she dropped me off, and I would steal from the friends. I would stay with one friend, and I would steal CDs, T-shirts, video games, controllers. Had a big duffel bag, and I'd go stay with another friend. Everything was like Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. Each night I would stay with different friends, and I had a huge duffel bag with all of this stuff. And my mom was going to come Sunday night, pick me up, bring me back home, and I got all of this new stuff. Shopping spree.
Let me ask you, did they ever call you out on it?
Well, so my mom didn't come. Her car broke down.
Oh. So
I'm stuck in Alabama, like, who am I going to stay with? Because I can't go back to their house. I got all their stuff in my bag, So I ended up staying at my girlfriend's house and in her treehouse one night. So we stayed in her treehouse one night. The next night, we were hanging out at the Warlock's house. I was like, hey, can we crash here? He said, sure. So we crashed there. Another one, like my mom kept pushing the date back. It was like Tuesday, so she's supposed to come. We're just like left as teenagers, stranded, trying to find places to stay. And I stayed with the guy across the street one night from the Warlock.
Right.
And so I thought my mom was coming the next night, stayed with the Warlock, and stole some stuff from him. I stole a video game. It was a Dungeons and Dragons video game. I went to across the street, put it in the closet, came back over there to hang out. Hey, what's going on? Acting like everybody's cool. There's all kind of people over that night, and they're about to have a party. There's people over there about to start smoking pot and drinking. All these people just out of nowhere. This huge party breaks out, and they're in the gang involvement and stuff like that. So it's kind of, they're into like dark stuff, right? So we're sitting on the couch, and there's all these other guys there who I've never seen before, and older gentlemen, and they all were wearing black, and they were sitting in the living room. We were sitting down with the guy, with the Warlock, and somebody opens the front door, walks in with the video game that I stole from. They found my bag, and they hand the video game back to the Warlock, and he looks at it. They look at each other and they shake their head, yeah. And I'm sitting there like, oh, I think we're gonna get jumped because they're in the gang involvement. They really dark stuff, and so they look at each other, shake their head, yeah. One of them stands up, and I look up, and they walk to the back. Another one stands up, walks to, I think they're getting guns or bats. I don't know. One at a time. They all go to the back. I told my cousin, I said, hey, we got to go. We got to go now. He said, no, there's a big party, a bunch of girls.
Because he has no idea what's going on, right?
Yeah, we got to go. You didn't see that? He said, no, man. I said, we got to go. We walk outside. I told him. He's like, oh, I said, bro, we're about to get jumped. It's not going to be good. Like, they might torture us and stuff. Like, it's kind of stuff they do. So there was this guy out there talking to some girls around his vehicle, and I asked him, I said, hey, can you give us a ride down the road? Because my girlfriend, her parents were just right down the street. He said, sure. So we got in with a car with this guy we didn't know. He drops us off about a mile down the road, and we were going to try to make it back to the treehouse. We had slept there one night before, so we get out, and we start walking up the road, but then we hide in the bushes because it's not dark yet. And so we thought we seen her parents in the yard, so we was gonna wait for the sun to go down a little bit and try to get that clear shot to run to the treehouse so we could stay the night. So we're around the bushes by this open field, and we're trying to look and see when we can go. And I seen this light going through the yard, and I thought the light was her dad.
Okay, this was in her parents' yard.
Yeah, I thought the light was her dad with a flashlight. But literally, we watched the light for about 45 minutes, and it almost seemed to mesmerize us as we watched it. And it would just kind of hover through the yard. It was like, and it started getting dark. And it's like, okay, we need to make a run for it now. So we go around the side of the bush to the open field. And right when we did, out of thin air, this entity appeared. And it was only thing I could say it looked like was an 8-foot tall camel. Appeared out of thin air, blacker than the darkest of night, screamed and ran past me and my cousin, knocked us both down and vanished as some type of elemental entity that was summoned to go out and get his stuff. And we got up off the ground, freaked out, and we both took off to the treehouse. Now that was right before all of the bad stuff happened to me, so you would think that would say, hey, stay away, don't mess with this stuff. But for me, it was like, that's where the hunger came from, that, hey, if I got good enough, then I can summon a creature like this. I can, do those rituals and learn how to do that. And so that even got me in deeper to where eventually, so I'm doing all of the books, right?
Let me ask you, and your cousin saw this thing too, so it wasn't just you.
Exactly. That's the thing, because everybody's like, well, it's just in your head, or maybe it was this, maybe it was that. A lot of people talk about DMT being released in the brain and you having this supernatural encounter you created.
Yeah, right.
But when you have more people, it solidifies it. Hold on. It wasn't just me, and it literally knocked us to the ground. But yeah, that opened up those doors for me to tap into the other side, but it wasn't good,
Did you, I take it, so did you, well, of course your mom finally showed up, right, and took you back home?
Well, it was, so as we went trying to go to the treehouse, her dad sees us. He comes outside and sees us. And they end up calling the cops, and they had nowhere to take me. They took us both to the police station. Wait,
who called the cops? Her dad?
Her dad called us. What are y'all doing? It's, we're like panicked because this just happened. And I'm like, I'm shooken up. I'm in tears and stuff. And I don't want to tell him, like, I don't know if we tried to tell him. I don't think we did, but they called the cops on us and ended up, the cops didn't have nowhere for us to go. So they sent us to, like a boys, not a boys home, but a foster home with all the children. So we're, I'm waiting for mom to come get me. Now we're in a foster home the next day, and they take us in the middle of the night, drive somewhere out, wake up, they go in here, lay down. We wake up and go have breakfast with all these kids and all these people at a foster home. And, it's just crazy. It's like, where the hell is my mom at,
Does she know where to come get me?
Yeah, and they had to come get me from a foster home. And I had to, they wouldn't let me leave with my cousin because his parents came and got him, but they said, we need your guardian. We can't just let you go with your uncle.
How old were you?
I was 15, 14, 15.
Yeah.
And, and so I had to stay like 2 or 3 nights in this Christian.
So let me ask, just out of curiosity, how long ago did you actually end up then there in Alabama? A week?
I've been back since 2000.
No, but I'm saying that how long?
It was probably 5 days.
Okay.
Probably 5 days.
That must have been a long 5 days, huh?
It was, especially at the, that place was sad because the kids were like, that really left an imprint on me because the kids were like, yeah, my dad's going to come get me this weekend. And they had all these, dad's coming, he's just working right now. And they were just all these random kids at this facility. And it was just like, man. And I got in trouble there. I was trying to teach the kids witchcraft there and stuff too.
Oh my God.
Like, yeah, we don't have to speak about that. They wouldn't let me wear my Marilyn Manson shirts and stuff like that, It was a Baptist home. I had hair. I had in my bag that I had some hair bleach, and it was the powdered bleach.
Oh.
And they pull it out. They're like, "What is this powder, son?" That's just bleach. I bleach my hair. No, we got to dump that out. They thought it was drugs.
And you're like, Mom, come get me quick. And it
Yeah,
must have been,
no, yeah,
ma'am, you need to come and get him now.
yeah, yeah. It was interesting to say the least.
So, and you know what? And again, you were, instead of, I mean, at that moment you were scared, but at the same time it hooked you in deeper because you were thinking, if this guy could do this. Now, let me ask you, during all this time, did you ever fear, I'm going to conjure something or invoke something I'm not going to be able to control?
Not until it came.
Once,
You know,
okay. All
while
right.
I was doing it, no, because I was like so hungry and so thirsty for it. But
Mm-hmm.
when it came, yeah,
Right.
I mean, we would sit inside and there would be entities and shadows that would run past the TV, and
Okay.
me and my girlfriend would both see it, and it
Okay.
would be in the corner, and we'd look and they'd disappear. We'd hear, all just strange noises, and
Okay.
a lot of it happened for me. So when my mom finally did come get me, um, she brought me back to Louisiana, and we stayed out in way out in the woods and by myself. My cousin was going to come back with me for the
Okay.
summer, or just a couple weeks at least. And but since he was gone, she didn't even bother trying to go get him. She knew we were in trouble and stuff, so brought me back. I'm staying out in the woods by myself in Louisiana at night. And I was so scared. I was still trying to do these rituals, and this was at the beginning of the rituals, or not when it
Right.
got deep. Um, I would be sitting on the couch, and again, the wind would blow through the house, and it was like old horror movies. I would hear whispers in the wind trying to communicate with me, and and I'm like, I'm just sitting on the couch, just scared. To all the lights in the house are
But you
on.
not scared enough though, huh?
No, not as long as people were around. But if I was by myself, that's scary. Yeah. When you're by yourself and like something literally happens. The weird thing is like I did a lot of solo rituals and stuff there out of the Satanic Bible
Mm-hmm.
by myself.
Right.
And I think like I look back on it, I feel like I was just lonely, like I wanted attention. Like I wanted even so much an entity to show up and hang out with me almost.
Man,
Like that's
you
kind of
didn't have
weird.
any siblings? No
I
siblings?
did, but they were different places. Living
Okay.
with different people at the time. My mom was going through stuff, and
Okay.
you know, so yeah. But at this particular spot we were at, I was by myself with my mom, and my brother would come in and out at times, but you know,
Okay. Let me ask you then, did your mom know what you were trying to do? Or did she have any idea? Or
no. I mean, she knew I was into dark stuff and discouraged, some of the attention stuff, dressing weird, makeup, gothic, that kind of thing, cutting. So any of that kind of stuff, she would didn't want to have it, but she didn't know about any of the witchcraft or stuff.
what if she thought you were eventually just going to outgrow it?
I guess so, but yeah. I mean, I was getting into all the gothic stuff, and
Well, I mean, there's a whole, you know, thing that goes with that because, a lot of times I'm not going to say always, but sometimes it's a sign of depression,
oh, for
you
sure,
know. That's like an outward expression of depression.
attention, yeah,
Yeah, it's
attention for
attention, but
sure.
also depression in a way. In a way, you know what I'm saying? Um, it's all mixed. It's a mixed bag of things. Um, so here you are, and like I said, it's great also that your wife has become part of this. And have you been? I'm gonna say I want to use. Have you become the person that's been able to bring somebody that was you before? How you said
Oh, yeah.
that you found that person that was able that you went to when you were basically looking for something, and they were able to. Have you been that person for somebody else who maybe
Yeah,
was into either witchcraft or
yeah.
just bad stuff?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean that's with everything with my ministry, my podcast, my
Mm-hmm.
music, the book. It serves two communities, and both of them are younger versions of myself. It
Okay.
serves to the young lost soul who's into things or dabbling into the occult, or just they're into the mysterious and the unknown. So we talk about those things on the
Okay.
podcast, and I don't denounce everything. I want to make sure everything's done in the right light, in the right spirit, and
Right.
again, looking at some of the stuff in the Bible, almost like a right way to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the podcast and stuff is to reach out to those people. But then the other half of the audience is the person who's still in church and in the religious community, who are having dreams and visions, and,
Okay.
and entities are showing up, angels are showing up, and they're getting impressions from the spirit world, and they're not always demonic, right? They could be
Right.
angelic, they could be ancestral, right? So just looking into some of that stuff, and like, instead of just cutting it off or being, hey, that's not of God, it's demonic, cut it off. And there's still these things. You pray against it all you want, it's going to keep happening. It's an ancestral cry, it's an ancient voice that's there. It's
Hmm.
your birthright, so I minister to those people too, those people who are, they don't have anybody in the Christian community to talk about. And so let these people know you can be different, you can be strange, and you can still embrace your faith and your foundation in God and in Christ and in the Bible, and showing you things that, look, it doesn't mean that, you know, God is against you just because the church is, and I
Right.
show them in the scriptures, these divination even, and casting of lots and
Right.
things, and talking to angels, leaving your body, like all of these things to be done. All of these things are tools. They're spiritual technologies and tools that we have here, but we have to use them with response. We have to be responsible, and we have to use them in the right light. So I try to teach people that, and so that's the two sides, and both of them are just like me speaking to a younger version of myself out there.
Let me ask you, and I'm going to say, because I've also heard of this, that once you start doing that work, you become a target because from the dark side, they want you, in other words, they want to derail you. All
Yeah.
right. Has that happened to you after you started doing that work?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I mean, they show up in different ways, and but knowing just the way things work,
Mm-hmm.
and my faith and my trust and my foundation and my past, I have a contrast now. At
Okay.
first I had no contrast. This was it, that was this. Now I have, okay, this is rock bottom. This is losing your
Okay.
mind. This is euphoric bliss in the presence of God Almighty with angels and Jesus Christ.
Right.
I've been in both sides, so I have a
Okay.
contrast now. So,
Okay.
but as far as having a target, yeah, they show up in different ways and different
Yeah.
trials and tribulations in your life to
Right.
and things like that. But I believe, I trust the process. I'll say
True.
that,
True.
and I feel like if there's things that I could open myself up to open those doors, like I
Mm-hmm.
did when I was younger.
Right.
So I make sure that those doors are shut. Even with the exploration that we do, it's all done through Christ, through the Holy Spirit, and any type of um, benevolent entity, and asking God, who is the lover of my soul, you know what I'm saying, for these beautiful experiences. So everything's kind of filtered through that. Um, so come whatever may, like, it's part. I believe that He's the author and finisher of our faith, of this life and this beautiful experience that we have, and He's written some really cool things in it for us to explore and to find out and to embrace. So without fear, and fear shuts us down from a lot of things, like you were mentioning at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. So I embrace it, and I try not to. I try to make sure that I'm doing the higher level things. Like, if you,
Right.
like, when I tapped into the spirit realm and trying to talk to spirits, I was robbing people. We were in a gang affiliation, all kind of bad stuff, lying, cheating. Um, so when you tap in to the other side, whether it's through meditation or astral projection and all that, you're going to see the entities that you're entertaining.
Right.
So I tapped into the other side and saw grotesque entities that wanted to have their way with me, and did, and quite literally in the physical, and it had spiritual implications. And so now on this side, I'm able to tap in through meditation and through prayer and through trance and through fasting and all of these beautiful spiritual technologies again that we have. But now I'm having beautiful encounters with God, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, angels, and I trust God. And so it's been a beautiful encounter on this side.
Let me ask you, Derek, have you ever run across somebody who, like you said, maybe whether they were into something dark or they were doing stuff, and that you felt, you know what, I think I can handle going into these areas with the understanding that I have now. But have you ever run across people that you advise them, look, you should never dabble in this? In other words, because you realize that there's something about their personality that, in other words, if they start going in that direction, it's just too easy for them to slide back in. In other words, not everybody is ready, and some people never are. By this,
Yeah.
I mean that just stay at this level. I'm sure you
Well,
found people
yeah,
like
so
that,
I mean,
right?
I have to put up with that on the podcast all the time because
Okay,
I talk to people from all walks of life, and so some people who may be into dark stuff,
right.
I haven't seen anybody who's been in or experienced anything darker than I have, to be honest with you.
Okay,
And I've
there.
talked to people across all the spectrums and things, and so as far as like discerning where they are and if it's delusional, if it's demonic, you know what I'm saying? I haven't really dealt with anybody like that, and I've interviewed hundreds of people, but that's for me. That's my discernment, right?
Right,
Other people would say, "Hey, that's a psychic. Stay away. The Bible condemns psychic phenomena." And so I
right,
have to put up with that. So that type of information can open up doors for other people, right? Just
right.
because I can talk to them, they may open up and
Yes,
get into something totally different because of a guest they heard on my show. Now I'm not going to condemn them. I'm going to
right.
talk the practice. We're going to look at it. I'm going to see where it fits in the Bible if it does. But I really do. Again, I trust the process for those people too.
Yeah,
That wherever they're supposed to be, that if they get into it, there might be something for them to learn. There's always grace, God, and I want to let them know that God is bigger, and the love of Christ is bigger than any of those other spirits. I mean, I go
right,
through so many encounters in my book, but at the very end, I talk about the supremacy of Jesus and how all of these other entities and demons and spirits, they have to bow, they have to listen. So if you ever find yourself in a place where you don't want to be, my story, call out to Christ. He'll always be there. I know atheists and I know Hindus who are having encounters and sleep paralysis, and they don't call on Krishna. They say Jesus, and the encounter stops. And so I make sure that that's known, and not in a religious way, just in a spiritual pecking order and hierarchy. That because the whole thing with it, obviously with my past, I have to be careful. I have
sure.
to warn people.
Yes,
There are red flags, but I don't want to stifle exploration either and say, "Oh,
right.
stay away from everything. Don't do it. Don't do it." So intention is key.
Well,
What are you
and
trying
the
to do?
thing is that I think sometimes people know that they're getting into a danger zone, and then they go to somebody, let's say like you, who they look up to, and they almost want you to approve of it. Like
Oh,
internally, they kind of know, I shouldn't go there, but hey, if I speak to him and he gives me the thumbs up, then it'll be okay. Yeah, like because they don't want
yeah,
to listen to their inner intuition that tells them either never go there or you're not ready for that yet.
yeah. And so with that, like you just kind of, it's so funny. I have to always like, I guess, reiterate the foundation or something because like every episode of the podcast or every song is not going to be the pros and the cons
Uh
and how to
huh.
do it. And, so it may just be the subject matter, may be this one thing or whatever. But you find a lot of people looking for, I think I find that I talk to a lot of people who are, what I'm saying, where I was. And I think there's hope for everyone, no matter where they are. Um, and I think
Yeah.
we really champion the inner work and healing and getting through your darkness and embracing the light
Yes.
and even embracing the darkness.
Yes.
Now I can look back at what I went through and I'm thankful for it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Now when I was going through it, that's a different story. But now I have that contrast and I could say, okay, this is that, and I have an appreciation for life, for sanity, for peace, for breath. They were stealing my breath from me.
Let
Like
me ask you
I
that.
was
What
I was
happened with?
wheezy and short of breathing. So now I can
Yeah.
breathe. Like I'm thankful for my heart was racing and doing weird stuff. I'm thankful for my heartbeat. Like,
Yeah.
I have appreciation for life now.
Absolutely. Let me ask you. What happened once you switched gears so dramatically? Think about it. How did your family of origin, by this I mean your mom, or how did they handle that? Were they on board with it?
Oh yeah.
Uh,
They were trying to take credit for everything.
oh, they were.
Like my
Okay.
mom and my granny and brother, like they were like, yeah, and they would kind of, because my family likes to talk
Yeah.
and bicker and gossip and stuff, and
Uh,
they're like always looking to one up one another. It's like, well, I let him stay with me, and I brought him to
oh.
church, and you kicked him out, and so my family were like, they would like family reunions and talking to people and say, oh yeah,
Uh,
Derek's in church now, and he's there, and because I've changed my life, and they were all like trying to take credit for it.
okay. That's
So they were
good.
happy,
That's
yeah.
good. That's good. Yeah, it was because of me. Huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
But well, that's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Because I've heard of sometimes people making those changes in their family of origin. It's like, They're not on
Yeah.
board themselves. They kind of like, oh,
I
you
made
know,
it out, man.
yeah,
You
yeah,
can't do nothing but be happy. You know what I'm
right,
saying?
right.
Though just the person that I was and the person I've become and becoming, you know.
Yes, yes, and that's really what you're saying is, we're always in a sense evolving, you know,
Oh yeah, yeah.
what we
I mean,
are.
there was times where I thought I had it all figured out, you know, even as a Christian, and I thought I knew, and I would debate people and challenge them, and all that kind of stuff, and because I thought my way was right,
Right.
and that got busted up really quick and got put on my butt and shown a bigger world and more inclusive, but it was more beautiful, but it was had to like an ego death and swallow your pride
Oh
and
man,
see
the
that God is
ego,
in.
the ego will do it all the time, doesn't it?
hmm
Yeah.
It's this weird thing when we have this way of saying what God is and what God isn't,
Hmm.
and He has a way of coming through and say, "Oh, let me show you," or God doesn't speak through this, or God doesn't love this, or you start seeing God. If you can't see God in all, then you can't see God at all, and see
Right.
how inclusive the love of God is. It permeates everything, and
Yeah.
He is in all and through all. And the Scripture says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. The Lord is not divided." And so I can look into the darkness and can see Him, and I can look into the light and can see Him, and my questions and my doubts and my fears, and I see Him in everything. And that's being able to see the light and see the beauty in all things.
Right. And because I think sometimes, like you said, sometimes we want to impart the way humans look at things on God.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Because humans react to it or make judgments this way, well then God must do it the same way.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, not
It's
necessarily.
like, well, how convenient that God is against the same things that you're against.
Yeah.
God doesn't like homosexuals. God doesn't like black people. God was like, hold
Right.
on, you
Right.
don't like gay people. It's not God. You put, everybody has this God that's created after their own image, and they create this God, and that's a form of idolatry.
Right.
You created this image, and this is what He is, and He doesn't like this and doesn't do that, and those paradigms are being destroyed, and it's beautiful.
Now let me ask you something. Was I took a quick look, and because you mentioned that when you were getting involved, this was before you started, you know, going more into the Christian way of life. That yeah, you got the dark stuff, but you were also doing stuff with I'm gonna use the term very Wiccan or New Age. Okay, by this I
hmm
don't mean dark. We're talking here fairies,
Yeah.
the gem, minerals, all these beings, which we don't necessarily equate as dark or demonic,
hmm
but are not part of Christian Judeo-Christian belief. What is your understanding of that now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at first, so I had to get rid of everything. There
Okay,
were
right.
times where it was
Mm-hmm.
so at first anyway, because I'm
Right.
just coming out of this barely making
Sure.
it out. I didn't want to be around
Absolutely.
anything.
Right.
So being around incense and burning incense, I couldn't
Right.
be around it. Couldn't be around
Okay.
anything, anybody drinking or anything like that. So
Sure.
first of all, it was against it. Stay away from it. All that stuff opens up doors. You burn incense, it opens up doors. Until I started studying the Bible, being a student of the Word,
Mm-hmm.
and just doing my studying, being open, more inclusive. I begin to like when it comes to crystals and things like that. Like I have a whole study in my book where the ancient priests used crystals
Right.
and they used gems and rubies and stones, and the priests would wear it on their breastplate, and because
Right.
crystals have the ability to change your frequency or your vibration,
Mm-hmm.
how you feel. You can
Right.
hold them and they make you feel a certain type of way. And
Yes.
so the priests would wear these breastplates with 12 stones on them, and it almost acted as a conductor to
Right.
put them in this vibrational frequency to go in the presence of God and talk to God. So it's like we're condemning crystals and gems and rupees and things like
Right.
that in the New Age,
Right.
but they were used in the Old Testament. And in all of the tribes, they had their own crystal or rupee that was their
Right.
symbol. So
Right.
I'm like, hold on, these things we've been told were demonic by the church, and it's like, hold on. And then incense, the priest would
Yeah.
cleanse with incense. They would pray and believe that the incense carried their prayers to heaven.
Right.
And there's different aromatherapy that the
Yeah.
incense make you feel a certain type of way.
Yes.
The Magi were the first people
Yes.
who showed
Exactly.
up at the birth of Christ, and they brought frankincense and myrrh and and it changed that. Frankincense changes the way that you feel and puts you in
Right.
a more peaceful mood and cleanses you out. So it's like it opens the door to some of these other things we call taboo, burning candles and all that kind of stuff. So that, and even with the other entities, as far as like the elementals and stuff, there's some obscure scriptures that I go into where that talk about the elements of the world and the different beings that are here that are over the elemental kingdoms. And
Yes.
I'm showing throughout the scriptures that there's different ways that Moses and some of the patriarchs would encounter these angels. They would just call them angels.
Right.
The word angel just simply means messenger. An angel
Mm-hmm.
is not a tall, blonde-headed, blue-eyed man with a
Right.
sword and wings. That's not an angel. The word angel means messenger. So they would encounter these angels. Some of them would come through the fire. They
Okay.
would be burning a fire, and then an angel would come through it as a portal and
Mm-hmm.
speak with them and deliver messages from God. Go back in the fire and go back to heaven. They travel through fire, through water, through the wind. So
Right.
it opens up these other messengers. You
Right.
say, well, the angels are fire. The messengers come through the elements, God's elements. And so getting into some of that stuff, it really expands our understanding, of looking into the Greek and Hebrew and what these things are, and
Sure.
changing our paradigm, and seeing, all of that stuff and some of the other things that are mentioned, like communing with the dead
Right.
is another thing that I'm looking into. Reincarnation is mentioned of in
Right.
the Bible, and
Yes.
Jesus was expecting, and the Jewish people were expecting Elijah to come back, and then they thought
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was Elijah, but he said,
Right.
"No, I'm not him." He said, "But you've missed him. He's already come." And they're like, "Who was he? We didn't see him.
Right.
He was John the Baptist, and you didn't even know it. Elijah
Right.
had already come back. You guys were waiting for this prophecy, and he came back." And so the spirits of the patriarchs are coming back and communing with the ancestral cry, and looking into, like, there's another encounter where Jesus goes up to the Mount of Transfiguration, and we get to see what he was doing during his prayer and his meditations, where he would go off for hours. He
Right.
brings Peter, James, and John with him. They go up this mountain. He's like, "Come with me. Come pray with me, guys. I got something I want to show you." They pray. He opens up the heavens. His clothes change. His face changes. It starts glowing. His clothes change to all white. The clouds open up, and Moses, I think it was Moses and Elijah, begin to speak and commune with him through the clouds. It's the
Okay.
great cloud of witnesses, and the Bible says we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, that the elders who are speaking with us from beyond the grave and teaching us through meditation, through prayer, and Jesus was communing with them. As far as I'm concerned, this happened every time he went into prayer. This was like the first time that we kind of got
Right.
to follow him with a camera. "Hey, what are you doing?" Because they would always fall asleep, and he'd say, "Stay up a little bit longer." And they'd always fall asleep, or they
Right.
couldn't make it too long. I would say, "Look, stay with me." And he showed them some of the things that he was encountering. And it's really interesting. And so we look at Eastern thought. This has always been believed in Eastern thought, that your elders are teaching you from behind the grave. The Native
Right.
Americans believe that their
Right.
ancestors are teaching
Yes.
them, and
The
and
ancestor
come
worship
and
and everything.
they come through dreams and stuff like that. So it's like very similar things in the Bible that I've never heard about this ever.
Right. Right.
So I'm looking into some of this stuff that's really interesting. So we get to kind of reevaluate some of the stuff that we've kind of threw off or called Eastern mysticism or New Age. Just hold on. This is Christian mysticism. This is
Right.
in the
Right.
Bible.
Well, I
You know?
tell everybody, the three wise men. Yesterday was Epiphany. Okay, and in Hispanic households, they don't do that anymore but the gifts were not given till the seventh, which is the day, because of course they came with frankincense and myrrh as gifts for the baby Jesus. And as a matter of fact, everybody brings down basically all the Christmas stuff after the seventh, because this was, the gift giving part was associated. We have the thing about Saint Nick and stuff, but
Yeah.
the gift giving was also tied into, like you said, frankincense and myrrh and incense and things of this nature were quite valuable
Mm-hmm.
back in the ancient world. And in other words, and of course we could debate about what they say is the actual date of Jesus' birth, whatever. But let's whatever. We'll pretend that December 25th is the actual date. It wasn't like he was born and the next day they showed up. It took them
Yeah,
a bit
no,
to
they
get.
Yeah, I mean that brings a whole other thing too with the context of astrology.
Yes.
The astrology is demonic. They followed the stars that led them to the birth of Christ.
Right,
They
exactly.
followed his star. They were
Mm-hmm.
reading the stars that said, "Look, the Messiah is coming. This is
Yes.
where we need to be."
Yes.
And they were the one. It wasn't the pastors. It wasn't the priests. It wasn't the religious
Yes.
leaders. It was the
Yes.
magi. It was the wizards who
Right.
showed up to
Yes.
greet the baby Messiah into the world.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And that's what this was like and like and back then these were not like you said they weren't Jewish, and of course Christianity didn't exist yet, so they were, like you said, they were coming based on basic a prophecy, in other words, or an
Hmm.
identification of
Yep.
who Jesus was destined to be or who he was. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and unfortunately, of course, like everything, that it's been massaged, depending on who's doing the massaging of the version of the story.
His story. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. It could. There's a lot of different interpretations, and I would say that a lot of the stuff, whether, like you said, whether it's crystals or what, a lot of it has to do with your intent.
Hmm.
Okay, if your intent is, I'm going to make it real simple, is either creation or destruction. If your intent is creation, whatever it is that you're using, you're going to be okay. If it's destruction, whatever it is that you're using, whether it's incense, crystals, whatever, beads, symbology, symbols, sigils, take it, whatever you like,
Yeah.
the outcome will be all based on the intent of the person. And that's really, people don't realize that and I don't know if you saw this when you said you were hanging out with that guy who was a warlock. There's a lot of invocations where they'll say, well, you need candles of a certain color, or do this or do that, or
Hmm.
really the person who's really powerful doesn't need all that, because basically all those things are to sharpen your intent, to get you to see it
Focus. Hmm.
and manifest it. Okay, the person who's really adept at that doesn't need the candles of certain colors or this or that. Their intent is so powerful that they can conjure it and manifest it. And that's why sometimes you will have people that they might be, if you look at them from the outside, they look like really, they're not in, how can I say it? They're not doing anything dark, but what's in them, their intent as a human, is dark. And even though they might surround themselves with good stuff because maybe they're dark human beings and kind of like are pretending even to themselves that what they're doing is not wrong, the outcome is wrong because their intent, and I'm sure you've heard of it or seen it firsthand, even with religion. You'll have some
Oh yeah.
people that
Yeah.
they want to like cloak themselves because they think that they're doing the right thing, even though
Yep.
really what's driving them is destruction.
Mm.
And the
Yeah.
outcome is, like you said, putting people down, judging them, or I'm sure you've seen it, you're going to burn in hell,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah. And they get very self-righteous, but they think they're justified in doing this because they think that they're doing it from
Yeah.
the
For
religious
God.
perspective. Exactly. Exactly. And intent has a lot to do with that. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the only one that really knows what's in your heart is God. Nobody else
Hmm.
knows, really. And like I say, what do you do when nobody's watching you? Either to praise you or to condemn you.
Yeah.
Okay? What is it that you truly do in that moment? Because a lot of people, they do or don't do things, one of two things. Either because they're looking for praise or recognition, or they're afraid of punishment. God, if I get caught doing this, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
So, and of course, we always come back to, and I'm sure you've come across that, being responsible for your own actions is really what it boils down to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that always, that sometimes people look to religious leaders, and that's good. I'm not saying it's wrong, but ultimately we are responsible for our own actions and the consequences that come with them. So yeah, it's Yeah, it's very interesting. You have a very interesting outlook on. It's based on what you went through, Derek. That's really very interesting, and I'm glad to see what happened with you because I know that there's a lot of people that never get to where you're at.
Yeah, a lot of people never make it out. I got
They
lucky,
don't.
you know.
They don't. They don't.
So
They don't. They
yeah,
they either stay there or just bad things happen to them. You know. So
yeah, yeah, for sure.
well, anyway, I wanted to thank you so much for being part of my show. You were so fascinating. You were great.
Thanks so much.
And I want to wish you the best of luck with your book on, I don't know if you have any upcoming projects now for 2020. Okay. But absolutely. I wish you the best of luck and that I hope you'll come back and, I don't know, are you planning any other books now for 2020 or what do you got
Um,
going on?
Not any. I'm working on some courses and some other materials and
Okay.
things like that, and still trying to get the book promoted and try to
Mm-hmm.
get it out there a little bit more. I
Okay.
published it myself, so I don't really have a company or nothing with me. So,
Nothing.
going on podcasts and doing interviews and talking about my story and stuff like that. Try to get
Yeah.
the book out there.
Okay. Okay. So, of course, and like I said, I'll put the link to your website on the credits of the show. But for my podcast listeners, what's your website address?
For sure. It's truthseekah.com, truth, SEEKAH, truthseekah.com. And you can find all my stuff there. My podcast, my music, my books, and everything that I create. It's a lot of different things, meditations,
Okay.
all that stuff.
Perfect. Okay. Again, thank you so much and good luck to you.
Thank you, my friend. You too.
You too. Bye bye. Take care.
All right. Bye bye.
Wow. He is such. Let me tell you something. That's heavy duty stuff, okay? Heavy duty. All right. Heavy duty. Because and the reason why I say this is, sometimes, some people do know people like Derek, like TruthSeekah, who've get involved in stuff just because things, they're young and things are happening in their personal lives, and then they run across the wrong people, and before they know it, their life spirals out of control. Like, if you listen to him, he wasn't only experiencing spiritual turbulence as far as who he was hanging out with, and what he was looking to as far as spirituality. His whole life, he was stealing. His whole life across the board was in big, big trouble. Big, big trouble. And you know what? And I like his story because I know a lot of people, it's a story of redemption. Because I think sometimes people, whether you're young or you're old or maybe stuff, yeah, whatever. Everybody's got a different threshold in their mind where they think that's it, I'm done for. I can't change. Either I'm too old or I've done too many bad things or whatever. I don't think that applies. I don't think that applies. I think that the moment you make that decision and here's the big and, okay, really important that you decide to do something to make it real. What did he do? He was a realist. And he understood, if I stay living where I'm at, I don't care how much I want to get out of this lifestyle. I don't care how much churching I get. It's going to be too easy for me to find myself back in there. Because you got friends, maybe even family, who knows, whatever. He did the smart thing. And it took a lot of courage, which was to leave town. And what he said was about that when he looked at the logic of getting, like he said, to the Alabama, to his girlfriend's parents' house, it was like, no money, no car. And instead of saying, well, I guess we're screwed, we're going to have to stay in New Orleans. No, they looked beyond the possibility of what they could logic. Okay, the logic tells us nothing, we're not going anywhere, but we're going to go outside of logic. And some people say faith and everything and this and that. And look, and it happened. Okay. And the reason I say this, that some people sometimes when they want, and sometimes it doesn't have to be as dramatic as something like this, but they'll look at situations or changes that they want to make, and they'll sit there and they logic themselves out of it. Oh, you know what? For me to do that, man, this has got to happen. There's just no way, or the money, or the this, or the that, and they just like basically talk themselves out of it, of the possibility. Never saying, well, you know what? And this is another thing, and I want to say this, it pertains not only to what you do, but when you pray. And by this I mean prayer in any whatever your belief system is. Judeo-Christian, whatever, spiritual, I don't care. That sometimes people pray a certain way where they say, well, I thought that for me to, let's use his example, get to that place in another state, I'm going to need this and 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 this. And if it doesn't go like this and this and this, they forget that sometimes with prayer, you can say, you know what, I think this will be great. However, I'm open to anything else you want to send my way. The reason why I say this is that sometimes solutions will manifest in ways that you don't understand that it will. And when you don't leave that possibility open, it's, okay, why are you limiting yourself? Why? And I'm going to give you an example. This is way out there. Let's say your car is really bad shape. Okay, you're lucky if it takes you 10 miles down the road. And you need money to fix it. And maybe you're praying and you say, you know what, I need money to fix my car so that it will get me to this place, so that, and then okay, well, what if you go one day and you enter a $5 raffle and you win a car? People will say, oh, Marlene, that's way out there. Why not? My point being that, yes, you could say, you know what, I really need to find a way to fix my car. Either a mechanic that'll do it, or just the money somehow. Something. But they close themselves off to any other possibility. Any other possibility. Okay? Or somebody just saying, look, hey, you know what, I'm getting rid of this car. It's not the best, but let's say the car might be in a lot better shape than yours. And this person gives you the car. I've heard of this. It happens. The point being that sometimes we shouldn't limit ourselves to what our logic dictates as what's possible or what's impossible. Because there's a lot of things out there that you might have no knowledge of, which of course is why you don't include it, that you could bring into manifestation or into, by this I don't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist in your world, in what you know of. Okay? And by leaving that open, that door open, and I want to say it now, to do that, there's a very, very important part. And I have people, myself included, you have to remind yourself, it's expecting the good stuff, expecting good luck, expecting a good outcome. Because we kind of tend to do the other way around, which is, yeah, I'm going to pray, I'm going to hope for all these good things, or that I need this, but, I know this is not going to happen. Like almost like, hey, if I prepare myself and I tell myself it's not going to happen, then the fall is not going to be as hard. It'll just be like, okay, I knew it. No, expect it. Expect it. Yes, this is going to get solved. Some piece of good luck. Something's going to fall my way. Something. Another example, what he said about his girlfriend and her job. Okay, there you go. How about that one? That was great, by the way. That was a great story. Yeah, here you are trying to basically save your soul, because I swear to God, that's what it sounded like. It's like it happened for him. But let's face it, we live in a world where practicality, you need money, you need a job. Especially if, Okay, here we finally got over to this other place. Now, how are we going to feed ourselves? You know, her parents were going to help, but I'm sure they weren't going to look at them and let them just sit on the sofa. And part of that spiritual growth comes with the R word. You know what that R word is? It's called responsibility. Responsibility for yourself. Responsibility. People can give you a hand up, help, like the grandma did with some little money here for gasoline. The in-laws give you hey, we'll help with a car, but you got to be responsible for yourself. Part of that responsibility is called getting a job, because unless you're wealthy and then you wouldn't find yourself in that scenario. You need to work, and you got to work at something. BK, make a D, whatever it takes, you do it. Now you will only do this and embrace this responsibility, which sometimes, by the way, is really, really difficult. When you're really serious about the first part of it, which is what he was trying to do, which is, I want to save my soul. By extension, I'll save my life and my sanity. But right now, what I'm trying to do is save my soul. But my soul exists inside a human body that exists in this real world, which means I need to find a way to make a living. My girlfriend, she's on board. We need to eat. We need to live. While we figure it out on a day-to-day basis. Because, again, a lot of these things, and then people say, well, the reason why I'm saying is that a lot of people think, oh, well, it's like a clap of thunder, whoa, and then it's like it's a day-to-day thing. And by the way, this is the part where I say, the people over worry, we gotta like rein ourselves in, because I think it happens to all of us, where we're trying to anticipate the bad, or we get, and that's of course what drives anxiety, where you have to say, you know what, I'm going to do this on a 24-hour basis. This is my little square being, 24 hours. What can I do today? Just today. Tomorrow, what? Today. What do I need to do today to get to that point? All right? And then do it. Then we come to the E word. It's called execute. You can only plan for so much. You can only pray so much. At some point, you have to execute. And hope, of course, learn from your past mistakes. That's very important. But also be prepared to forgive yourself for mistakes, or say, "Whoop, that didn't work out right. Oops, don't do that again." But you have to execute. There's a lot of people that go round and round. They're stagnant because they're so afraid of making a mistake, especially if in the past they've made some really bad ones. But you got to execute. You can research, you can study, you can say, okay, you know what? I'm not being impulsive about this. I slept on it, or slept on it for a week. Maybe I've discussed it with another person who I know would give me good feedback and tell me, hey, that's a great idea. I've done all of that. I've exhausted all of that. Part of personal responsibility to say, I'm going to do that. Okay, let's do it. Or let's say him and his girlfriend, who's, they seem to be a good team. What do you think? Are we going to do this? Yeah, okay, well, worst case scenario, what will happen? Okay, let's do it. And you do it, you execute. That's another thing. You execute, you do it, you go, and a lot of times it takes a lot of faith to execute, by the way, because there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of variables that can be very, very scary. And a lot of people sometimes, believe it or not, spend the best years of their lives always being afraid of executing. Basically, they do just enough to do what they're supposed to do because they're forced to, but they never go beyond that because they're so afraid of failure or judgment or just this inability to risk anything at all. So again, I think he's a fascinating guest. I hope you guys really enjoyed him. I've got a slew of great guests coming on this year. A lot. I've got a lot of them lined up, believe it or not. I'm already working on season 8. Contrary to what you see on the slides about season 7, I already got season 7 just about wrapped up. So pretty soon I'm going to get things going for season 8 of Stories of the Supernatural. And guys, I hope you catch me on the different podcasts. I'm on all the big platforms. iTunes, Spreaker. If you're on Spreaker, you can find me. If you have a Sonos system, you can just go to Spreaker, the connection for Spreaker, and look me up, and you'll find me there if you want to blast it on your Sonos system in your house. Of course, you can always go to my website, MiamiGhostChronicles.com, or NightShadeDiary.com, or SupernaturalStorytime.com, and I've got links to the podcast. You can either click it, listen to it, you can download it, or I've got links to the YouTube videos. And again, you're going to find it. And if, like I said, about once a week, I'll write up some weird story on stranger than fiction stories, which is a blog that I usually just look at really weird stuff. Sometimes some of it's old stuff, like unknown stuff. Other time is newer things. So just about everything. Paranormal, just weird, true crime. And now in December, I released my second fiction book called Diabolique, a civil novella. It's a shorter book, a little bit over 40,000. You can find it for 99 cents on Amazon's Kindle. All right, and of course, if you subscribe to Kindle, you could get all the books for free. And again, I've also got a newsletter, which I usually will tell you, besides social media, I usually put on there books that are coming out. If I've got new books coming out, and sometimes I'll even ask for people's opinion. If you're into supernatural fantasy, urban fantasy, that kind of genre as far as fiction books, then you're going to want to read my books. I think you're going to really like them. They're way out there. Way out there. Isn't that great? All right, guys, take care. Again, wishing you and yours the very best of luck, long life, and prosperity for 2020. Take care.